Ever since my Idols of Torment terrain, I've been wanting to make something for Trench Crusade, but I feel like I don't have a reason. I make a lot of terrain for a lot of games that I'll probably never play. So when I saw that Luke over at Nerdcraft HQ was making a table, I reached out to him and said, "Hey, can I make something for your table?" So it gave me an excuse to actually build something. So I took a trip down to my local thrift store to see if I could find some weird stuff.
Actually, I'm really excited about this one piece. So this, I'm kind of thinking about having scaffolding. Like this is something that's under repair. That's being made out of stone, and then there's maybe a makeshift sniper's nest. That's my metric. I need to not want to give it away. I think that's a good thing. That means that I made it good enough. If I'm like, I don't care, I'll just give it away, then it's not good enough. That's how I see it.
For this project, I knew that I needed to source some greeblies. I could probably 3D print them, but honestly, I don't really like 3D printing when it comes to making terrain. I really only 3D print models. I have a lot of conflicted feelings when it comes to 3D printing integrated with terrain. It always makes me think of that Studson video where he builds Howl's moving castle out of trash. And I always think about it from the perspective of what if every time he needed a weird piece, he was just like, and then I 3D printed it. That video would kind of suck. So I started with making a structure that the boards that you would walk on sit on top of. And then I had some reusable straws that I cut down to size and spray painted. I honestly love the way this thing turned out, but if I was going to do it again in the future, I would actually make the scaffolding removable so that you could put it around other structures. I think that's a really cool thing that you could probably do for your games, is just make a bunch of different tiered scaffolding, and then you could just get these sculptures from Goodwill or wherever and just use that scaffolding around them, and then you have a ton of dynamic terrain.
Yeah. This might be really bad, but hopefully I can make a cast or a mold of this, and then I can cast this, and then I can kind of chip and chisel away and kind of sculpt into this. Feels vloggy, man.
Hey dude, what's going on? Just updating my mind.
I wanted to include that clip because it shows my working thought process and kind of what direction I was thinking about going, but I'd never actually made a mold before. And because of this, I heavily misjudged the amount of silicon that I would actually need. So when I poured it, I ended up only getting a half cast, which did work out pretty well, but it was just not tall enough for it to be a dynamic piece of terrain. So I decided to pivot and paint the piece directly. I put a little bit of sand and glue in with my paint mixture so that it added a bit of extra texture. And you can see the way I paint it on is by dabbling it or stippling it on. This is because if you have sand mixed in with your paint and you drag the brush in a stroke, it's going to move all of that sand into one spot, like it's a broom or something. You could honestly do just this plus a dry brush, and you would have some awesome looking stone sculptures that you could use as scatter terrain. You can see as I'm going through, I'm using minis to test the durability and stability of the piece. I actually added in additional supports because the middle was caving in, and I kept doing this throughout the process just to make sure that this could actually be played. I added in some armature wire for extra stability as well as visual interest. And honestly, that is the vast majority of this build. You could do a really simplified of this version really quick, and I just spent a lot of extra time on the details because, again, this is a piece that I'm giving away, so I want to make sure that it's as good as possible. I don't want to give away something that looks like a steaming pile of shit. I would just feel embarrassed to even slap my name on it. Really, the only criteria that Luke gave me was to make sure that the piece is really muddy and kind of dirty looking. So for the sculpture, what I wanted to do was add in some black mold. So for the paint job, I started with some washes and I layered on in progressively darker colors, starting with a green, then going to a brown black wash, and then to a black wash, eventually trying to sell the look of a black mold. Honestly, it doesn't really read that well on camera. It looks more just like mossy growth, but in person, it's actually much darker than it appears in all of these glamour shots where I have direct light hitting it. I dressed up a 5-hour energy with some strips of papers and some little bedazzling jewels, and then I added thin strips of foam wrapped around the straws and also bedazzled those, so this looked like some reinforcement to the steel piping. One thing that's cool about doing something in this style is that it seems like more is never enough. You can keep adding and adding and adding details, and it always seems to look better. It never seems to take away from the piece. So I just kind of went crazy with this, adding in more supports, adding in more strips for reinforcement of steel, and adding in more. But I still wanted to add something a little more interesting that kind of fit in the Trench Crusade world. And so I found this little glass tube, and I wasn't really sure what it was used for, but it made me think of like a test tube where I could put a specimen inside. So I wanted to sculpt something weird and fleshy that looked like a piece of forbidden knowledge, or something that a religious group would reveal to their followers to show the heresy of the other side, something like that. Like, look at the beasts of hell that they have. It felt like a really low pressure way to practice sculpting. This is really only the second thing that I've ever sculpted, so It felt fun to experiment with some techniques. For painting, I actually use enamel washes mixed with speed paint, and it creates this effect. I think it's called mottling or molting, something like that. You can see the paint in the tablespoon. It's separated like oil and water almost. Using a fleshy enamel and a bright red speed paint, this makes it look like splotchy blood or veins. For the resin, I used some really old 2-part epoxy resin. When I first started working with this, it was extremely cloudy. But if you boil some water and you hold the bottle inside there, allowing it to heat up, eventually over time it will mix back together and become reusable again. This was literally years old at this point, but it is salvageable if it gets to that point. I was pretty antsy to see what this looked like submerged in resin, so I ended up putting this directly into the resin while it was still wet, and the resin had a ton of bubbles. So I went ahead and got my vacuum chamber to extract some of those bubbles, and because of that mottling effect, when the vacuum chamber was pulling those bubbles out, it actually started pulling some of the paint off too, and it looked like viscera that was floating around in the tube, giving a really nice look. For the weathering of this piece, I really wanted to use some enamels that I got from Grim Dark Compendium because I've had them and they've just been sitting on my shelf for a couple of weeks and I've been dying to use them. The only thing is, when using these with acrylics, enamels are solvent based, so they will remove acrylic paint. So you have to have a protective layer over either a matte varnish or a layer of super glue. The first time I did this, I was scared to ruin the piece with the enamels, so I used the super glue to coat it because I know that would be protective, but I eventually started using the matte varnish and I would highly recommend just using that. It's just as protective and it's a lot easier to work with than the super glue. It doesn't have the nasty fumes, you're not gluing yourself together. Overall, just a more enjoyable experience. So after my initial grime coat, I left that to dry, and then I started working on a detail for a megaphone. I see a lot of Trench Crusade having these megaphones around, and honestly, I probably should have 3D printed these, but like I mentioned before, where's the fun in that? I do want to say that I'm not against 3D printing, and I'm not trying to bash or shame anyone that uses it for their details or for things in their work. Do whatever works for you, as long as it makes you happy, and as long as you're creating something, I think that's the best thing. I see a lot of unintentional negativity in the hobby of people shaming things that people use or do, but they're doing so in a way with a smile on their face, like they're just talking about the thing, and it just makes you feel kind of bad. So fuck that.
A big part of the reason why my projects take so long is because I just get sidetracked in the middle. I mean, I started making shelves, and now I, for some reason, think that this needs to be done before I can move forward with my project at all. For no reason. The way my brain works. And I just have to deal with it. Haha. Project's still not done.
Honestly, that was one of my better tangents that I went on in the middle of a project. That upgrade has changed my life as far as working out of a closet goes. It is very chaotic working in such a small space. When I bought the initial statue, there was also a little tank that they had for sale, so I wanted to take the top gun off of it and have it as like a mounted artillery thing. Originally, I was going to make it a sniper's nest, but when I happened to see that, I decided to pivot the structure so it can have like almost like an automated turret or something that maybe you could imagine somebody getting inside and controlling it from there. Okay, side tangent questions. Do you prefer this style of audio where I'm kind of just recording stream of consciousness, or a scripted audio? Also, do you prefer me to actually describe more of what I'm doing, or talking over how I came to these conclusions, or why I'm doing things? The ground is plaster of Paris and rocks mixed together, and then I used a very stiff brush to add in additional textures. There's not actually any paint on that brush. Initially for painting the earth, I started out using the enamel washes, and it gave a really good look with a lot of diversity of color, but it was very light because the base color of plaster of Paris is white and enamels are very translucent. This made it be very bright, so I decided to then go back over it with an acrylic wash, effectively wiping out everything that I did. If I was doing a brighter piece, I would definitely use these for the ground in the future. It gives a much more realistic and believable look. And for me, that's really important. What I'm trying to do with my terrain pieces is blur the lines between art piece and terrain piece. I want something that you can see stand alone outside of the game that still looks like an awesome display, or something that could just stand as art on its own. I feel a certain sense of minimization when I refer to pieces as terrain, or when I refer to the building of them as crafting. It almost feels like, yeah, I'm going in my little arts and crafts room to do my arts and crafts, when, I mean, this is truly art, and everything that all the other people are making out there for terrain is art, and I think it should be treated that way. So you know what, you out there, you're not a tabletop crafter, you're a goddamn artist. Okay, I'm getting a little preachy here. Let's go ahead and finish out this build. I built this shield that's mounted to the turret gun just because I thought it would look kind of cool. I weathered it in the same way using an acrylic base covered with a matte varnish and then using enamel washes. Then I moved on to making the ladders for the scaffolding. This was the first time I worked with balsa wood and I really enjoyed it. It's very easy to work with, it's easier to cut than a toothpick. And I decided to not fix the ladders in place because I feel like it adds a bit of additional dimension to gameplay where you could homebrew some actions like I knock the ladder down or I pick the ladder up behind me as I go up, and then the next person that's kind of trying to chase you or get to you then has to make some sort of check to scale the scaffolding without using a ladder. I just think it adds a little bit more dimension. I made some little crosses because what's Trench Crusade terrain without crosses? It ain't shit, that's what it is. Just kidding. Then I went back and I actually removed some of my weathering because I went ballistic with it. I was in the zone. I was feeling myself, okay? Then I grabbed some actual wire trash and just smashed it under the tallest scaffolding to add some visual interest. This is actually really rusted and charred, so Luke, if you're out there, don't scratch yourself with this. You might need to get a tetanus shot or something. Then I made some sandbags to hide my war crimes where I had done a janky mounting of the turret and started gluing in some of the cross details that I had in place. And I decided not to glue down the sandbags because I wanted to have them removed because they do obstruct a little bit of the play area. So I feel like being able to remove that allows you to add more miniatures to the top, but it does also hide the janky green stuff mounting that I did. And you can see that I painted that black. And for some reason, I thought this was the most important thing in the world. I had to make sure that the turret could be rotated. So you can see that it is functional. After that, the last detail was just painting the sandbags. And that pretty much wrapped it up. I don't really know how to close out this section of the video, so I'm just going to go straight into the final shots. As always, thank you for watching. Hopefully this video inspires you to go to your local Goodwill and save something from the landfill.
Shit.
Anyways, be sure to like and subscribe. Drop a comment for the algorithm. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Hey, what's up, Shadow Wizard Money Gang? It's me. I'm back.
Don't with the trash. Don't you dare put that on YouTube.
I think this might be shit.